Hello, my beautiful baby. So, I'm going to talk about something that is discussed a lot in our society, but where this is the South, it's somewhat of a new and a different idea, and that is that the prison systems in America are some of the worst in the world. And proof of this is that according to prisonstudies.org, America has the highest prison population in the world at over 2 million. And according to Wikipedia, America makes up only about 4.4% of the world's population, but still holds about 22% of the world's prison population. And America also has one of the highest recidivism rate, or I'm gonna say reincarceration rates for the rest of the video because it's a lot easier and I'm too lazy to figure out how to say that word, at 76.6%. So the question that you may be wondering if you are actually paying attention is how did that number get so high? Well, a few things first is the question about how the prison population got so high in the first place, and that is a very simple thing that I'm sure a lot of people know about, being the war on drugs. Now, the reason that I assume this is that in 1970, Ronald Reagan started the Control Act of 1970, and in just 15 years, in 1985, it was estimated that each year 500,000 more people were being sent to prison, and if you look at some of the charts, it pretty much shows that crime has been way on the rise ever since the war on drugs. Now, there was a very simple way to fix at least that part of it, and that is to stop the war on drugs. Almost all drugs. And I know this may be a weird thing to talk about, but I'll put it in the perspective of guns. Since we're all in the South, we love our firearms. Everybody knows this. And I find it pretty hypocritical when liberals talk about guns this way while supporting stopping the war on drugs. So if you want to annoy a liberal, which I'm sure most of you would want to, you could bring this up. But let's say for a moment that all guns are banned and that you are not legally able to own a firearm. Well, I would assume most people here wouldn't give up their firearms. They would try their best to keep them. They would still continue to find a way to obtain ammo and even more firearms under the eyes of the law. And how would that be done? Well, a black market, of course. Gun crime wouldn't really be lower. Instead, people who want to obtain guns legally to defend themselves wouldn't really be able to, while there would be a black market, which would cause criminals to still have guns and be more easy to obtain them because they would probably be the ones selling them. Robberies would be more likely to go up, violent crime would go up, people wouldn't be able to defend themselves or their families. But want to know what happens in black markets? The ability to get a gun would be a lot more dangerous in many ways. People would have to risk their lives for guns and ammunition. They would need to hide crimes and dispose of witnesses if anyone were to see the crime and threaten to report it. And that's what happens with drugs. So in all reality, I believe drugs should be legalized. Not just weed, but most or all. Because I would feel like people wouldn't be so worried about getting arrested for having drugs, and that would cause them to dispose of them safer because they wouldn't have to worry about, let's say, cops showing up and them having to throw their needle into grass where some children can step on it. No, they could dispose of them safely. Moving on, however, I'm going to talk about that reincarceration rate, that massive number that makes it seem like there is no hope for criminals. But is it really their fault? I mean, I would go with the assumption that people can change.
Fusion! Ha!
But in prison, people are put into wards where they would have to fend for themselves. They would have to break boundaries for their safety, they would have to go against their own morals, and most of all, commit more crimes. They would have to get on a schedule and everything, and that doesn't sound like trying to help someone, that sounds like they're trying to hurt them and trying to control them. Yet not all prisons are like that, and some of the best in the world aren't like that. Norway, specifically Halden Prison, has a prison population of 75 out of 100,000 people, and a lot of them are just first-time offenders. It has prisons where people have more social freedom to do certain things, like, let's say, watch TV, read a newspaper, etc., and where they live in nice rooms like the ones you would see in a college dorm. They have people who get their psychological and medical help they need instead of just being punished for the crimes that they did. And it has one of the lowest reincarceration rates, if not the lowest reincarceration rates in the world at just 20%. I mean, that's still a decent amount, you know. But considering most people don't even commit crimes anyways there, and that's 1 out of 5 instead of America's 3 out of 4 statistic, I take that any day. Now, it's kind of odd to see a prison where most people are just first time offenders who would never get arrested again. But this is a thing that happens, and it can be accomplished under the right conditions. One being the explanation that Norway gives as to why prisons have a pretty low amount of prisoners, and how its prisons have such a low reincarceration rate, and that's because Norway goes by a principle they like to call normality principle, where people's life in prison isn't that much different than their lives at home. Yet it's really called restorative justice. Well, what exactly is restorative justice? Well, I'm glad you didn't ask because I get to see your salty reactions as I tell you. Restorative justice is a system of prison justice that tends to work more towards rehabilitating prisoners. Instead of just punishing them for what they've done, take into perspective of the different reasons as to why different crimes are committed, as in they take it as a social issue and helps working towards getting them to not do the action again. Like, let's say for example, someone robs someone, where what's the reason burglary happens? It's out of a social necessity, isn't it? It's out of a necessity to have something, not exactly a need. There's a difference between a necessity and a need. According to Susan Sharp, in her book called Restorative Justice, A Vision for Healing and Change, restorative justice is supposed to do 5 things. 1. Invite participation and consensus. 2. Heal what has already been broken. 3. Seek full and direct accountability. 4. Reunite what has been divided. And 5. Strengthen the community to prevent social harms. Also, some programs that are provided by the Service of Restorative Justice are community service, assistance by former prisoners, peacemaking circles, etc. And yeah, I know a lot of this sounds way too good, and that may sound utopian in nature, but it really isn't. This type of prison reform is what I believe prisons should do in the first place, and has been proven to be effective in many cases. If you give people their own freedoms, their own social freedoms, just like they have back at home, but instead in an isolated place where they have time to think about why they are isolated, then they can realize they've fluxed up and have time to think about what they did instead of just being bossed around. I mean, you don't have time to think about what you did when you're getting commands on what to do next. I mean, it's not just peaceful criminals either. There are people in the prisons who are in there for very violent crimes, and they wouldn't ever get out. However, I wasn't able to find any statistics as to how they've been acting in there now, as compared to how they were when they were out before. Anyways, that's my thoughts on the matter. I hope you enjoyed this video with horrible audio. I tried my best at 6 p.m. after forgetting to do this until tonight and then messing up in the original clip and accidentally deleting this end piece of audio, so I have to record it again. And I was about to go into a coma with all the food that I've ate at the time. In my final notes, I'd like to thank the internet, Google, Mr. Evans, Flamin' Hot Cheetos, Dank Memes, Harambe, and an energy drink in helping me think of some of the things to talk about in this project, as well as helping me to do this project in general. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed. I really don't know how to end this, so links will be in the description, and goodbye, my beautiful fluxing babies.